Hi there. Well, we're back to Worth Your Salt. We're going to read chapter 3. It's a little longer than yesterday's, but that's just the way it is sometimes. You have to break it where it needs to break. So here goes chapter 3. The dishwashing machine was deafening and hot when I stood right next to it, so I was about 6 feet away when I saw the kitchen door open and the new cook walked in, shadowed by the owner talking a mile a minute. The cook appeared to be paying no attention to the owner's words. Instead, I saw he was eyeing the grills, the floor, the lights, and the walls. A frown sat purposely on his face. A moment later, he was standing by me, looking at my hair. "What?" I asked. "What name?" he asked me. "John," I said. He nodded. "Wear hat, Juan." "Hat?" It was true I had long hair, but I was not around the food. I was around the dishwasher, and I could not imagine one of my long hairs floating across the room and landing on someone's plate, so I did not wear a hat or a hairnet. "I don't wear one," I said. "No?" "No." He nodded again. Then he removed his hat, plucked out one of his white hairs, and handed it to me. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked. "Eat," he said. "What?" "Eat, por favor," he repeated. "Please." "I'm not about to eat one of your hairs," I assured him. "Neither customers. Wear hat," he said, handing me one. I looked at the manager behind the cook, who nodded his head. I frowned, but stuck it on my head. The next day when I reported to work, everyone was wearing a hat or a hairnet. Nobody was happy about it, but we all had been told the restaurant was on its last leg and something had to be done to turn things around or we would all be out of a job. So we bit our tongues and smiled on demand. Julie, one of the younger waitresses, told me Furman was already in the kitchen making changes. Changes? What changes can you make in a kitchen? But before I could make my way to the kitchen, something else caught my eye. On the wall at each booth was a picture frame, but more than just a picture frame. These were glowing with light and made you want to look at them. When I looked up close, I saw they were listing his especials. When I looked back at the waitresses, they were all smiling at me and pointing to the kitchen. When I peeked through the swinging doors window, I was astonished at what I saw. Furman wore starched white slacks and an equally starched white shirt that made him appear more like a naval officer than a truck stop cook. He wore highly polished black boots with his pant legs bloused and a shiny black belt around his trim waist. His billowing chef's hat sat purposely on his head. In bright red cursive letters it spelled out Furman. I turned back around and asked one of the waitresses, Miss Fine, if he had started cooking yet. "Not yet," she said. "Does anybody in town even know he is here? The manager has been walking around town all morning telling people we have a new chef, but we haven't seen anybody yet." "Nobody for lunch?" She shook her head sadly. "Maybe they're waiting for supper," I offered. "Maybe," Miss Fine allowed. "Does he know?" I asked, pointing towards the kitchen. "He knows," she affirmed. When I pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen, Furman never even looked at me. He appeared to be making pie crust, and not just a few. There was a couple of dozen then made and ready to go in the oven, and he was still making more. When I looked over at the ovens, I could see they were full of pie crust. How many pies is he going to make? I went back to my station and saw there were a couple of tubs of coffee cups to wash, but that was all. Suddenly I heard a peculiar sound, a metal tapping sound. Tap, tap, tap. When I turned to see where the tapping sound was coming from, I noticed the tapping sound coincided with the steps the new cook was making. Does he have taps on the bottom of his boots? It wasn't long before the coffee cups were washing in the dishwasher while I was keeping an eye on the new chef. He seemed a peculiar man, not personable. He appeared to be in a world by himself and seemed perfectly content to be that way. I wondered if he was married. Did he have any children? Where did he work before he came here? And if he was so good, why would they let him go? Well, I figured the answer to all my questions would be answered soon enough. But the main question that kept running through my mind was whether he was a good chef or if he just made a good impression of being a chef. Then I thought maybe he'd been a cook in the military. Before long, the smell of his pies was drifting throughout the restaurant, and everyone's mouth was watering for a taste of them, which made us all start to believe that maybe he really was a chef. But if he really was, how was the owner able to pay him enough to keep him? Abruptly, the bell rang over the door, and a couple of regulars came in for coffee. They never ordered any food, just coffee. They took the booth over by the jukebox as usual and peered curiously at the framed and lightened espresso sheet on the wall in their booth. A waitress walked up and asked if they wanted coffee. "Yes, ma'am," the older man said, and then he pointed to the frame on the wall and asked, "What's this all about?" "We have a new chef, and those are his specials. Care to try them?" she offered. "Nah," he said, and then the swinging doors opened and the sound of Furman's taps came into the restaurant proper, with him carrying a pie in each hand. After he placed them in the display case, he walked around the counter and over to the men at the booth. "Buenas tardes," he said to them formally. "Good afternoon. I am Furman, your personal chef. You honor us with your presence. I honor you with my food," he said. And then he asked of the older man, "What name?" "Charlie," the man said, extending his hand. "Charlie," Furman repeated. And then to the younger man, "What name?" "Buddy," he said. "Buddy," Furman again repeated. "Charlie, Buddy, enjoy," he said, and bowed to them and returned to his kitchen. The two men looked curiously at each other and then smiled. I doubt that had ever happened to either of them before. "Say there, honey," one of the men said to the waitress, "what say you give us a couple pieces of that pie in the case along with our coffee?" "Sure thing," she said, and went to get the plates. When she cut into it, she was astonished at what she saw. She had no idea what kind of pie it was. So after she sliced the pieces, she stuck her head in the kitchen and inquired from Furman what it was. Then, when she took it over to them and set the plates on the table, the two men looked curiously at the pies. They had never seen a pie like this before. It looked to be a cream pie of some sort with a scattering of pecans in it. "What is it?" the younger man questioned. "This is called Texas pecan pie. It is different from traditional pecan pie in that it is not nearly as sweet. This is like a cream pillow for pecans," she concluded with a smile. As she walked off, I saw the younger man pick up his fork and take a bite of the pie. The look on his face was heartwarming. "Oh my God," was all he said as his eyes closed, and we could tell it must have been wonderful. There was no doubt we would all be trying the Texas pecan pie before we left for work today. The older man took a tentative bite of his pie and chewed slowly. We could all tell he was clearly surprised by the taste. But what he said next shocked everyone present. "Say there, honey, I want a whole pie to go when I leave here. Don't care what it costs, okay?" "Sure thing, Charlie," she said, calling him by his first name now that she knew it. A whole pie? I had never heard of anybody buying an entire pie before. A slice of pie was about $1.50, so that would be about $12 for a whole one. I could not imagine anybody paying $12 for a pie. The waitress went back into the kitchen to tell Furman how the man liked his pie. I watched him nod to her as if it was no big deal, and then he turned to her and said, "Watch, please," and he walked out to the men and stood before them. The waitress followed him out of the kitchen but kept her distance. Furman smiled at the men and inquired, "You like pie?" "This is the best pie I have ever eaten in my life," said the oldest. "It sure is. I don't know what you did or how you did it, but this is heaven on a plate," said the younger. Furman bowed and smiled. Then to them he said, "You take pie home with you, each of you, no pay. Let familia enjoy. I humbled by your praise." He turned to the waitress who served them. "No charge today, Charlie and Buddy." No charge? I wondered what the owner would think of that. It made me wonder if this chef couldn't keep a job because he kept giving away all the profits. After Charlie and Buddy left, the waitress went over to bust the table and saw that both men had left her a tip. There were 2 $5 bills on the table. After cleaning the table, she went to Furman and said, "They both left $5 tips. What should I do with them? After all, you gave them their pies for free. Should we put the money in the cash register?" "No, money yours. Put in purse," Furman told her. "But it was because of you, Furman. You should at least take one of these," she insisted, offering one of the $5 bills. "No, gracias," he assured her. "Thank you. You keep all. When do right, all make money." I'll see you tomorrow.